Turn by Macao. Lovely cushion header. And Gerrard! What a head, son! What a head!
Hello and welcome back to the Premier League Trio podcast. My name is Hader and I'm your host as usual today. This is an absolute honour for me. I've been following Jamie for a long time and I know a lot of United fans will know who he is. He is a Manchester correspondent for The Guardian, The Observer, and generally just one of the nicest people out there. Jamie Jackson, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. And what a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. Very too kind, probably.
Not at all. But Jamie, let's just jump straight into it. And look, it's been a bit of a difficult time for Man United fans, I think. Maybe I'm one of those impatient ones, I will argue. Perhaps I can be at times, along with the rest of the fan base. But we've seen United be a little bit slow in the market. Looking at Chelsea, they've gone and secured some very good signings. And, through the door very quickly. And United have been a little bit on the back foot. But we've seen that the reports just come out before we started recording that Donny Van De Beek has signed officially for around £35 million, I believe. So I just want to ask you, was this one that came out of nowhere, or was it one that United have had in the irons for quite a while?
Listen, if they've signed a player, or even if they get very far down the road, it won't just have occurred the last week or so. I think what's happened is they've got two or three positions that they're interested in. That would be obviously the wide attacking player, which is Sancho's number one, a centre back, and a midfielder. And then you could, if one of those doesn't happen, then they might look elsewhere. And so it's interesting because you mentioned about Chelsea. Chelsea are in catch up to a certain extent because they were banned last summer, weren't they? So they're doing two lots of summer's business in one, if you like. I don't even recall that. So they really had to get their skates on, take advantage of that. United, sometimes it happens early, sometimes it doesn't. But if you look at Fernandes in January, I always thought that would happen. It's easy to say afterwards, but I just did, just because of the way in which I was being spoken to about it by people who should know. And I know you didn't necessarily ask me about Sancho, but Sancho is similar to that. But just on Van De Beek, I think it's a good signing. I think Pogba now has direct competition. I don't think, as we stand at the moment, he's threatening Fernandes. I know Fernandes is playing higher up in the pitch, but he can also play central midfield if you're going to do two, and you wanted him to be one of them. It's good competition for Pogba. I think Pogba on his day is a magnificent footballer. A total package of a footballer. Apart from anything else, he just, in his own quiet way, he does sort of control a game. But what I would say is, I think Solskjær's two things. He thinks he's not consistent enough. And also, I know he scored a few goals. He did well for goals the season before last because he got into the PFA player of the season. Team of the season for this purple patch. But I think generally he's not happy about the amount of goals from midfield. If you look at Fernandes as a kind of front forward. So anyway, I think that's why he's brought him in. Good signing. It's €39 million plus €5 million add-ons, as I understand it. The guy was wanted by Real Madrid, Barcelona. You can't get much better sort of recommendation or competition than that. If COVID hadn't happened, and obviously the first thing is it's a tragedy for everyone who's been affected by it. But with regard to the finances, he might not be at United because Barcelona, for example, might have had the money. You can then say that Juventus might have had the money for Pogba. It's a slightly different story. I'm going off on a tangent, but what I'm saying is it's a good signing. It's a great signing, but he's got to prove it, like they all do. It doesn't matter where you come from. I suggest Lionel Messi, if he goes to City, will have to prove it a little bit. I'm not saying he's not going to do it. He's Lionel Messi, but anyway, what I like about him most is it's not an exact rule, but if you play central midfield and midfield for Ajax, you're a pretty decent footballer, and he's only 23. I hear not only has he got the talent, but up here he's got it. A little bit like Fernandes in that he's just a bit ruthless about wanting to win, and let's wait and see what happens. But you've got to remember about this window. It is a very odd window because of everything that's happened, the pandemic, induced lockdown, the fact that we've only had 2 or 3 weeks before we start the season again. I mean, I know United have an extra week, but, you know, and then the window going to sort of the 3rd or 4th of October. So I think this signing's happened just in time. If they get to the start of training, which started today, actually, I believe, and, you know, it's just happened, that's great. But if they sort of get to the end of the first week or into next week and they haven't signed anyone, it's looking a little bit not great. But now I'd say, you know, they're about par for where they should be, if I could put it that way, in terms of having one signing in, looks a very good player, bit of a coup price-wise. I mean, it's a bit like Fernandes. I'm surprised there wasn't stronger competition. And in January, we were all thinking, covering the club, oh, is that a sign that Fernandes isn't what he's supposed to be? Because why isn't anyone else jumped in? But, you know, let's see what happens next season. But so far, so brilliant from him. So I think it's, you know, the Harry Maguire thing hasn't helped. There's a bit of turbulence there. I'm not saying it's a distraction, but it's the last thing the club needed, sort of, you know, in this sort of period. So I think Woodward and Solskjær, because it was Solskjær who's driving this. Make no mistake about this. It was Solskjær who said, "I want that player." They don't sign anyone there, as it should be, without the manager saying, "Yeah, I want that player." It's not to say that they can't knock back choices of his, but what I'm saying is he would never actually. So he'll be happy. So let's wait and see what happens in the sort of the other two positions I mentioned, which is a centre back and a forward. You know, I think you've got to definitely get a centre back. The forward, yeah,
you have to.
Yeah. I mean,
you have to. The thing is, yeah, go on, Joe.
I was just going to say, centre back. Too many times I saw Lindelof and Maguire turn for pace, got up with pace. They can be made to look a little bit clumsy sometimes. The odd time, listen, people make mistakes, but there's too many times I thought crumbs. You know, Maguire was a little bit underwhelming for me. I'm not saying he didn't make you better. I'm not saying your defence wasn't good. But, you know, you're Manchester United. You've got to be supreme. You know, that's what Manchester United are. Look, you know, you don't need me to tell you that. So, yeah, you know, centre back is the next one. So let's wait and see what happens.
I completely agree with that. But before we move on to centre backs, I know we've been linked with a few names. But on the Paul Pogba point, look, I might be a bit negative here, but if there was no pandemic and Pogba had an offer from Juventus or Real Madrid, he'd be gone straight out that door. He's made it very clear a few times. Raiola's obviously said it. He wants to leave. I think obviously what you're seeing at United is there is an element of progress. There's an element of a plan in place, which we haven't seen for probably about 7 years. Clearly, the ownership do see Ole as someone who can build for the future as well. My feeling is that maybe this is just me playing devil's advocate. But is Van De Beek coming in with the view that he settles for 1 year, he's not put under pressure because obviously Pogba's there, and then next summer Pogba finally gets his move?
I think the beauty of this signing is, yes, if that's what develops, that's what occurs with regard to Pogba. I think the way you put the question is perfect because you've almost got the answer to the question in it. But if United have a flying season and, you know, Pogba, because I think what's happened with Pogba is I think he suddenly thought, wait a minute, because to a certain extent I couldn't really blame him if he wanted to leave, having been there sort of 2 or 3 years and you were sort of stagnating. But now with what's happened, it looks like you're going to build on it. I think he is genuinely fancying it. More than he ever has done. And I've got to say, listen, he makes mistakes in games, but I've never seen him not try in a match. You know, he can be better or worse in terms of actual form, but he's not someone who sort of, you know, he always brings something to the team. But I think you're right. I think this is the beauty of this signing. If Pogba decides, you know, if it sort of flares up again with him and he, you know, there is an offer there and he wants to leave, then they do have, you know, suddenly you're strengthened. And I think this is why he's being clever. I think this is why, you know, Solskjær is cleverer than, not you, but maybe some people think, because he's looking at all these situations all the time to a certain, you know, like he should do. But I just don't think there was necessarily that kind of, for whatever reason, it started with Woodward and the managers involved. With Mourinho and Van Gaal, it wasn't quite as long. There wasn't quite as much of a short-term and a long-term plan. And it's interesting, you touched upon it there. Believe you me, they 100% believe he can win you a title. Yeah, otherwise they would have sacked him last season a couple of times. Early December when you were playing Spurs and City, there was a chance then if they wanted to, and then there was one towards the end of January.
The Burnley game.
Yeah, just before came in, right? But they were never going to. You know, I kept on asking the question. I was told no way. What we said at the start of the season. So, people should realise that. And that's why what's happening this summer is good, because he's got them third. He's got the club third, which obviously he wants to. He does love the club. But what I'm saying is, there's money to be earned from the fact that you're going to be in the Champions League. And I think they're going to now repay him, if you like, or do what they should do, which is back him. And so, to put it another way around, you could have maybe seen a scenario in this window where you'd have got a centre back and Sancho, which is a great window. And people would have thought, okay, he's got two players, one of them Sancho, one of them's hopefully a very good centre back. But it looks like they're trying to get three, which I think is an excellent window. They really are sort of pushing it out, because maybe they've been a little bit cuter. How can I say it? Because I think Woodward has said publicly once at least, maybe up to one of these, when he gets on the phone for the quarterly accounts to holders, but I can't remember. So anyway, and he said that, it'll be difficult this window. We're in the pandemic, and I think maybe he's saying that, but at the same time, he's also saying, look, there's actually some money here. They're just not making it public, which is clever, So
I did see that actually. Yeah, I think it was in the AGM meeting where he said this. But that's one of the questions I want to ask, because obviously, like I said, you're very well connected with the club. You're in contacts with very key people, but usually there's a big fanfare around United's business every summer. And what you see is that United are linked. They're still linked to nearly every name under the sun. But what you do see is that there is a lot more talk coming from the club. But it's eerily quiet, apart from Jadon Sancho, which we'll talk about later. I'm sure you're bored as hell about talking about him. But it's very, very quiet. And this Van de Beek deal, although we've been discussing it with Ajax since January, that literally in the space of 24 hours, United just flipped the switch and he's a United player. So are the clubs sort of learning? Because you obviously hear Ed Woodward say, United can do what no other clubs can do. That's literally like going into a shop and you want to buy, I don't know, whatever, a new fireplace. This is such a bad example. I don't know why it says fireplace, probably because it's cold outside. But it's going into the shop and you want to buy a fireplace. You're like, oh, hello, I want to buy a fireplace. I've got £250 million. Direct me to a fireplace, please. And they're going to go and pick out the worst one and say, okay, yeah, this is about £2 million. It's so ludicrous. And I feel like Woodward gets so much abuse. And look, a lot of it is warranted when it comes to the footballing side, but I think a lot of it is misplaced. I think people need to understand the structure of the club better. But for you, do you think United, because I didn't think we'd sign more than 3 players, but you're saying to me a central midfielder, a centre back, a forward, and one more maybe?
No, what I'm saying is if they'd only got 2, Sancho and a centre-back, I think they could have, inverted commas, got away with that. People would have looked at it and say, okay, pandemic-affected window, Sancho's 90, 100, the centre-back's, let's say, 40, whatever you've just paid for Van de Beek. Okay, that's acceptable. But what the Van de Beek one says to me is actually they're going for 3. They really are going out for 3, which I think is... That's actually a normal window for United. So you got 3 last summer, right? James, Maguire, and Wan-Bissaka. So that says to me, wow, they really are backing. They mean business, and they are being clever about it. They would admit, because they have admitted, that they've messed up in previous summer windows. Not last summer, because I think that was the best one they've had until maybe this one. But the one with Moyes was a joke. They've never used that word. People who would know about it at the club, but they understand that it wasn't great for Moyes. Blah blah blah. And so here we are, 5 or 6 years, 7 years later. And you listen, they should have learned by now. And I think what we're seeing is that they have. And I think Woodward does deserve credit. He's never, not for a little while now, he's never really taken football decisions. Obviously, he has to sign off a check, if you like, or green light an potential acquisition, but he's never scouted or identified a player. I said, all right, there's no way. He is a clever man, but there's been a clever man, and there's been the chief executive or executive vice chairman of Manchester United Football Club. It's difficult, and so going on to Solskjær as the manager, he deserves a massive amount of credit. Listen, the club was not a happy place under Mourinho. It just wasn't, on the field and off the field. Internally, it wasn't a particularly joyful place to work there. I know a lot of people who work there, whatever strata, whatever part of the football side, blah blah blah. I can go for it all. If you've not got a happy club internally, when it's something like football, which does depend so much on confidence and morale and spirit, you're going to get nowhere. And he's revamped that while also revamping the team. Starting to shift out players. And then finishing third means that his authority there at United is growing. It's never been more, never been stronger. And so the club is becoming more and more his, if you understand what I mean. It's more and more in his vision. And that's how it should be. Pep Guardiola at City, I know he's got a director of football, but it's Pep Guardiola's football club. It's Pep Guardiola's football team. And that's how it should be if you've got the right manager. If you've got the wrong one, you're in trouble kind of thing. And that's why you get an argument for a director of football. When you've got the wrong manager in, what happens is people go, oh, crumbs. What we're doing here, if we had a director of football, we could get rid of this guy. But because the director of football is in charge of the sort of way we want to play and the type of players we want to sign, it doesn't. That's like a safety valve. But the problem with that is in the working model of a director of football, the manager kind of wags the tail of the director of football. So what I'm saying is director of football isn't really needed. You only really need one when it's like Van Gaal and you're signing sort of Schweinsteiger who's past it and Falcao who's sort of half injured, bless him. It's not his fault, obviously. You know, it's all a little bit... Di Maria's coming and he's writing a love letter to Real Madrid fans saying, I wish I wasn't leaving, when he's signing for Manchester United. I mean, as a British record, you know what I mean? You know, that's all a little bit. But those days seem to have gone. And I think it is a really good model if you get the right person for it to be an ex-player. I'm not saying any ex-player, you know, an ex-United player, because I think what happens is, with Solskjær, the thing that I think we underestimate, you know, people who write about the club, and maybe yourself, is that because he'd been there and done it at United, you know, he'd won the European Cup, he'd won 5 titles, he'd been one of Fergie's 4 strikers. Wasn't always in the team, but Fergie really had... He'd been there and done it. And because of the intelligence, it meant that he walked in there and players, you know, the one hand there was a view, oh, what's he ever won? It's only in Norway. But he could walk into United and he knew everyone there. And the players there are like, wow, Solskjær. You know what I mean? And that was a really smart move. And I think this is the best signing they've made since Ferguson left, is signing him as the manager. Because even if he doesn't win you the title, they now understand what the sort of fit you need at that club. It sounds obvious.
It's more than just your CV, isn't it, and your credentials? Because managing Manchester United, I mean, Jose Mourinho was obviously one of the greatest managers of the last 2 decades, probably of all time. I mean, you can't argue that his trophy record is brilliant. And when you're watching the Spurs documentary, you can see, look, the guy's fascinating. He's just if he's on a good sort of I suppose good wave, if he's riding a good wave and he's happy, he is probably the most charming and brilliant manager to have. But if he's not, then he's destructive. And look, I think he was never the right fit for United. You've got to be cut from that cloth, right? I know it sounds so cliche. I don't think any of the managers since Sir Alex, if you look at Moyes, that he should never have got the job. I remember hearing that appointment. I said he's going to get sacked before the end of the season. Van Gaal came in. He came in too late. But again, some of the signings were just puzzling. He spent a lot of money as well that year when they bought Di Maria, Herrera, Schweinsteiger, Schneiderlin, Luke Shaw. That was a nearly £200 million a year summer. So again, that was terrible. And then Jose came in probably too late. But Ole understands the club. There is an aura about him. I'll be honest with you. And then, you know, I'm always happy to be proven wrong. That's important in life, isn't it? If you're someone that can't change your view, then you're just someone that, you know, you can never have a conversation with them. When that day we lost to Burnley, I said he needs to go. He's so out of his depth. Right. I looked over his shoulder and I saw Mauricio Pochettino, who I still think is a wonderful manager. And again, he, for me, has some similar traits to Solskjær. They seem like they're cut from the same cloth. They seem to carry themselves well in the media. They seem to be people that are good man managers. They play football in the right way. I mean, was there ever a idea that United were going to go for Pochettino? Because it's quite obvious and it's quite well known that Woodward has been an admirer of Pochettino during his time at Tottenham, and he did a great job changing a club which was underachievers to becoming a Champions League regular.
Listen, I think since he got the job permanently, which was it March or April of 2019? I've lost track. That's right, isn't it? Yeah, it was sort of last year, wasn't it? Yeah, 2019. I don't think they've really looked at Pochettino seriously. It's a little bit like, you know, when they're going for a player, they'll have, look, if this doesn't work, they've got to have a backup plan. But I don't think they ever thought about it strongly, because I think he impressed them with what he thought the club needed, which was like sort of making it kind of Manchester United as Manchester United should be again, with regard to the morale, the culture, the team ethic. And I just think then this season that's just gone, don't get me wrong, there was plenty of times when I, as a reporter for The Guardian, was trying to find out, look, is he under threat? And every time the message came back, no. Now, you can be told that, right, in football. I'm not talking necessarily about United. You can be told that in football, and the next day, manager A gets sacked. You're like, oh, thanks a lot. But, you know, if you talk to a few different people at the same time about, you know, like Solskjaer's position, you're hearing the same thing, you have to sort of go with it, because what else have you got? You know, if you talk to people, you should know. So I don't really think they ever thought about Pochettino seriously. What I would say about Solskjaer as well is he isn't as, maybe you don't think this, I'm not saying you do, but he isn't a soft touch. You know, he was in that team with Keane, you know, Cantona, you know, proper footballers who were like brutes, if you like, you know, the nicest possible way. But, you know, you go out on the football pitch with them, Gary Neville, you know, Beckham was a born winner. You know what I mean? These people didn't really... Players like that, and this is what he's after doing, they captain themselves, if you understand what I mean, when they go out. You know, you've got like, sounds a bit cheesy, but you've got like 5 or 6, 8, 9, 10 captains in a proper team, because they've all got this self-pride, and they're like, you know, this is me, and I'm going to perform for myself and for the team. I don't need anyone. And, you know, you sort of see where Keane gets frustrated when he's looking at not just United, but football players. Now look at this, because he complete opposite, takes total responsibility. And I think Solskjaer's got that, and I think that's what he's getting in his team. Fernandes, the game he played against the last one before lockdown away in the Europa League was very interesting, because it's behind closed doors. You could really hear, because I went there and covered it. You know, who was vocal? Maguire as captain was quietish, but you could hear him. But Fernandes, wow, he'd only been there, I think, about a month. He was rollicking people. You know, the guy was like a ball of I and we need to win, and that's what he's doing. And I think that is spread up. I think Woodward, who's a smart cook in his own right, and the Glazers, whatever you say about them, you know, they were smart enough to keep on Ferguson. You might say that's an easy thing to have done, which it is in a way, but you know, he wasn't keen on the Glazers coming in, and you know, if that had upset them, but you know, they could see what they had, and I think, yeah, there's been some serious missteps. It's interesting you say about people being able to change their mind. I thought Moyes was a great appointment, because I thought it was, at the time, I thought it was refreshing. I thought, not necessarily for the football ability, because I didn't know too much about it, I just thought...
A British manager.
Yeah, they haven't gone for a big name. They've almost kept it the United way, and that backfired. So I was proved wrong on that. You know, we all get these things wrong. So I would be very excited if I was a United fan, because I think this next season, you've got, a month left of this window now, right? Yes. We've just seen with Van De Beek, as we were discussing, you know, you can sign a player tomorrow. You know, before you know it, you could have these 3 players, and it's like, wow, look, you know, he's got them singing his tune. He's got 3 more players that he wants. You know, I don't think many teams are going on to play United next season if you can get these other 2 players in.
I agree completely. It's fascinating, but it's a difficult job, isn't it? I might as well ask you then about your autobiography before we talk about a few transfers, because this is just a great conversation, and I think there's a lot of people out there. I'm not one to have a little keyboard warrior argument with someone, but of late I've had a few, because someone turned around and says Ole is the virus, but it just makes me angry, because, as you said, the culture in the club needed a reset, and that was always going to take time. My fear was always that, would he be able to make as many wholesale changes as he could each summer? That's my issue. I still firmly believe, like as you said, 3 is usually what we bring in. United usually should be looking at more than that, in my opinion, at least minimum 4 every summer to improve the squad. But talking about Ole and your autobiography, just tell the listeners a bit more about that, and what sort of insight have you got? Because obviously you're going to be working very closely with him.
Yeah, I nearly sort of mentioned this, because I've been writing this biography basically since he took over. Well, since he became permanent manager, actually, is when I signed the deal. Yeah, so as I say, that was March, April of last year. So I have watched this whole thing unfold in real time as I'm doing this biography. And the biography is obviously from when he was born, you know, as a kid, to sort of now. But obviously a massive chunk of it is United as a player, but also as a manager. And what struck me as I was doing and talking to players he'd had, you know, when he managed in Norway, even ones at Cardiff, ones he played alongside, was nearly all of them the best way to describe it, they would sort of almost light up at the sound of his name. So even however many years later it would be, he'd had players who played under him, especially, he'd had an effect on, not just as a footballer, as in adding to their game and making them, to coin, you know, a phrase I heard more than once, the player that they are now, but also as human beings. There's a real human touch there. And people remember that. People remember how you're treated. Yeah. But what it means in the short term, in a team environment, is you actually really, it's not just a job, you actually really are getting something to do with your own personal feelings of worth and happiness out of, you know what I mean, out of playing in this team and for this guy. That's certainly how it's characterised to me about Solskjær. You know, he made a difference to their lives, not just their sporting careers. So anyway, I'm getting all this stuff and I'm thinking, he's gone to Norway. It's his first managerial job. You and I could have a debate, and I could see it all sorts of ways about, well, it's only Norway. I'm not saying that, but people might say, but you know, he wins Molde a title, their very first title ever in their history, in their 100th year, in his very first year of management.
Yeah.
And then he goes and retains the title. Again, I can hear people say, yeah, but it's only Norway. But I don't care who you are. If you go into a football club that's never won anything in 100 years, is it one of the sort of, not minnows, but kind of down the pecking order in Norwegian football, and you convince those players that forget about those 99 years of history, we're going to win this summer, this season, even though I'm new to management, and then they go and do it, that's quite impressive. Then to retain it is a different thing. So anyway, I'm getting all this information, hearing all this stuff, but I'm seeing what's happening at United. And you're going from sort of the great start to like the really terrible finish to the season before last. You know, when you lost to Everton 4-0, that run of form. And I'm thinking, crumbs, are they going to get rid of him here? Or are they going to give him some proper time? And he survives that. And I'm seeing all this stuff. I was getting so much, I don't know, different sort of types of negativity. Oh, you've done this book about he's going to be sacked. You know, and I could sort of think, well, yeah, he may well be sacked, but it doesn't take away what you know, the sort of story of his life. But at the same time, you don't want him to be sacked because you feel like he's got a chance. And so to see him come through it now, it's interesting because I wonder how many people, you've obviously done it, and there will be a lot of people, you know, will sort of say, well, maybe we got this wrong. The thing with football, though, right, is United could conceivably, I don't think it will happen, but you could conceivably lose your opening 3 or 4 next season. I don't think you will, but what I'm saying is if that was to happen, suddenly he'd be rubbish again. And as always, the truth is somewhere, you know.
It's reactionary, isn't it? It's either one extreme or another. And as football has, and society has gone the same way, hasn't it? As football has, I suppose, become more, well, a lack of patience. I think society is reflected in football. If you look on Twitter and football, I praised Arteta the other day because after the Community Shield, because I actually think out of the 3 managers that get compared a lot, Lampard, Solskjær, and Arteta, I think Arteta is tactically the best. I think he's so impressive what he's done in such a short time with a club who have, you know, had an awful defense for the past decade. They've been spanked by the big teams, and he's gone and beaten City. He's beaten Liverpool twice. I know one was on penalties. He's beaten Chelsea, and I was getting so much abuse from United fans saying, "Why are you tweeting this? He's not, you know, it's this rubbish." But you know, to have an opinion that's a little bit different and to stick to that is very, you know, very. I think that's quite admirable.
Yeah, and I think that Solskjær's also kind of had to, because the other thing you've got to remember about football, there's not many businesses in which the business side of a business is played out in public and it's reported on. You know, there's so many things that someone like Solskjær or Ed Woodward, you know, or any club cannot say publicly. They just can't. There might be something screamingly wrong, which is doing a massive injustice. It happens all the time, or a minor injustice, or it's just, you know, it's a breakdown of communication, whatever it is. But for a myriad number of reasons, they cannot write them in public. You know, so they have to almost wear this stuff. You know what I mean? Listen, they're paid handsomely. They're multi-millionaires, and that is part of the job. Don't get me wrong. 100%. That is kind of part of why these guys and women, you know, when there are women involved, are good at their jobs because they're able to judge. And anyway, so, you know, with Solskjær, I think he's a smart cookie, and I give him a real chance. I give him easily the best chance of anyone you've had since Ferguson. And you might say that's obvious now, but I don't think it was obvious, you know, in Christmas sort of time or whatever. But I was thinking, I think he just needs. I remember writing a couple of pieces for the Guardian saying what he needs now is just to survive till the summer, you know, where we are now, sort of the close season, because then he'll get some more players in and blah 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 blah. So, you know, it is very interesting. I just think, again, I like, you know, if you can get Sancho. Don't know if you want to talk about Sancho now, but that would be a very good Sancho.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, let's talk about Sancho. I'm sure you're bored about Sancho, but look, I'm gonna ask you a 3-parter.
Yeah.
Because I know you've been on a few podcasts this week. I know you went on Usman's the other day. He's a good friend of mine. And so I even heard you on All for United because I contribute there as well. You've maintained that you think, you said all parties want it. And I agree with that. I think it's quite obvious that obviously it's United's top choice. Dortmund have a price. And if United pay the price, then it will happen. And Sancho clearly, I think, wants to move. But I don't think he's going to rock the boat because he owes his career to Dortmund, really. You've got to think about it. He made the big, I guess, risk of moving to Germany, new culture, different football at such a tender age, and they've given him the platform to become one of the best young talents in the world. So it would be completely unfair for United fans to expect him to go and rock the boat there. That's my opinion. I know a lot of people disagree with that. But I had Kieran Maguire on the other day. He's a football finance expert. Very fascinating. And we went through United's finances. Yes. And United are in a healthy position, of course. We know that. But they don't have enough to put down payments that large up front for a player. For me, if they can't do that and they can't shift players out the door, then the transfer doesn't happen. Simple as that. So do you think it's going to happen? I know it's difficult for you to say. Is it true that United's money situation is a little bit tight compared to the likes of Chelsea? Obviously, they've had a transfer ban, so they've got an extra year of spending. And finally, is Joel Glazer, as the reports came out a few weeks ago when I first spoke to you, is he the one that actually signs off on the deal? Because for me, that's a bit of an issue. When you got, obviously it's his club, but when you got someone at the top micromanaging like that, and when he sees value, and that's a very subjective metric. For me, as a fan, value is potential, current ability, what he can become, what he offers to the team, what he gives the manager in terms of an extra dynamic in attack. But to Joel Glazer, someone that isn't a football man, and like for you, you're the same as me. You're thinking footballing terms. Obviously, you got to think about the commercial value. But as a commercial person or a businessman, surely you're just looking at the numbers. Okay, well, if it's this much for this, this age, this bigger contract, can we afford it?
Well, I mean, to take the last part or the last question of the three there, I don't think it's anything new that Joel Glazer, I wouldn't call it micromanaging, but I think him and Woodward speak, if not daily, most days, and have done ever since Woodward's sort of took over from David Gill, which is sort of 2013, obviously that summer. So really, that's not a big surprise to me that that suddenly someone has written that, because I think, and I wouldn't look upon it in a way. Woodward, it's not Woodward, as you just said, it's not Woodward's club, so Woodward has to go to his bosses because he works for them, obviously. So I won't worry too much about that. That's always been the way. Do I think it will happen? Was the first question. My answer to this question is I don't know, because I can't see the future, but I think there's still a very good chance. And and the reason why I say that is because it's gone quiet in terms of any new development. But where the situation is kind of where it was when it looked like it was about to happen. In that United still want him, Dortmund still want to sell. I'm not saying they need to sell. There's a difference there, okay? So if I said they needed to sell, I think you would see this being hurried up a bit more. But I think they want to sell, and Sancho wants to go. And how can I say this? There is rocking the boat, and there's rocking the boat. So I don't think someone like Jadon Sancho or any player really, unless they're really desperate, and he's certainly not that, is going to go public. But there are other ways of, how can I say, accelerating a process. And each club, and both Dortmund and United, could also use other ways than going, inverted commas, public to sort of accelerate the process. So, do I think it will happen? I don't know. But I'm not any less confident than I was sort of 2 or 3 weeks ago, when I was pretty confident. I'm actually on holiday this weekend. I had a conversation just before, I went off for a break, which was Friday. So, okay, we're now Wednesday. 3 or 4 days ago, I accept that. But then the conversation was, this is from sort of people who would know about it. This is a little bit like the Fernandes situation, where it took some time, but in the end, listen, it doesn't mean to say it'll definitely happen, because it is impossible to know. But I thought, okay, let's wait and see. Well, what was the middle question with regard to?
It's regards to the finances. I mean, you're hearing a lot that we need to sell before we can buy. Sure, for me, that's what's going to happen. You need to get Smalling out. You need to get Jones out. You need to get Lingard, Pereira. I think there's talks about Fred. We can talk about him in a bit, but surely that's got to happen first from any situation. What I don't understand though is that United managed to shift out Sanchez, who was a huge chunk of your wage bill. I think that's great business they've done. I don't care he went for nothing. The rest of his contract, which now it's just off our books. But with United, surely they should be able to afford it. A club of that size, in terms of
I've never said they couldn't afford it. And this goes back to my point earlier about looks like they're trying to get 3 proper players in rather than just 2. Because the Van De Beek one, to me, it's not a bonus. That's not the right way of saying it. But I'm thinking there's that. I know he wants a centre back. I know he wants Sancho. So the fact they've got Van De Beek doesn't mean to say one of those 2 positions goes now. I don't see that at all. So I do think they have the money. I think what they're more concerned about is listen, there's overinflated because United or your City, you've got a load of money, and then there's overinflated where that's been pushed and the Mickey's been taken. And a little bit like Haaland at Christmas, January, when they just walked away because of the agent fee, basically, that's been demanded by Raiola. They just weren't happy at all. I think that's what their concern is here, that the agent fee is overblown. Not the player wages, but the agent fee is maybe overblown. And with regard to the price, I don't think the price is that big a deal. I think something can be worked out. If Dortmund get more or less what they want, and what I think might happen is, let's say they want 120, they might end up with 100, and then there's 20 of add-ons. So today, Van De Beek was, I think, 5 million add-ons, I was told, euros. Fernandes, if you looked at the Fernandes deal, actually what Sporting Lisbon got, they could say was what they'd always asked for, even though actually the down payment, the first payment was 46, which is way below what they're after. But if you looked at the add-ons, then both sides could say, we got our man for what we wanted to pay. And I think that's what will happen with United. If it happens, they'll pay X amount. I don't know what it will be up front. And then there'll be maybe 20, maybe 30 of add-ons, and maybe 10 or 15 of those are a little bit in the future, like you've got to win the Champions League.
Yeah, or Ballon d'Or or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, almost, not impossible, but so let's I think that's the way this deal can be done. Whether it will be, let's see. I mean, I think I'm not hearing anything different other than all the 3 parties want it to happen. So that's quite a good starting point or middle point for any sale.
I'd agree with you in the terms of it's been very quiet, and for me that's a good sign. No one's actually said negotiations are over, so I just think United have to work a few things out. I mean, that brings us on to a few of the other positions. So obviously with Van de Beek coming in, again, I just think it's just such a clever signing. A signing that United have done that with Bruno. I think that's a clever signing. I think Wan-Bissaka as well is a clever signing. A lot of people are on his back because he's not Trent going forward, but he's a very, very good player. And United have had a problem at right back probably since Wes Brown, John O'Shea, I would say. I know you can think about Neville. I know Valencia had a good season. Young filled in for a little bit. Darmian was pretty poor. Raphael, I'd say probably. They haven't had a right back. So I think that's good business. Generally speaking, Ole spent the money well. But we were linked very heavily, or we still are to an extent, to Jack Grealish. I honestly believe if Villa had gone down, Grealish would have been a United player very, very early on. Is Grealish now off the table that Van de Beek's come in? And we might as well couple this with the Thiago rumours. I'm a big fan of Thiago. I think I'd like nothing better than bring the guy that I think is the heartbeat of that Bayern team. He was the conductor. He was just on another level. I think his injury record's a bit of a concern. His age for me is not a problem because United have got a very young squad. We've got the youngest starting 11 in the whole of the Premier League. But is it just a case of Bayern Munich trying to hurry up Liverpool to put the money down? Or is it actually a case that this could be another Timo Werner situation where United could come in with the money?
Again, with transfers, it's very difficult to say, but I would suggest it's a little bit of a remote chance now for Thiago. I don't see why they would go for him now that they've got Van de Beek. And they've got Fernandes and Pogba, and I just don't really see why they would pursue that. And Jack Grealish, similarly. I mean, Jack Grealish could sort of play up top wide as well, but I just don't. Not at the moment. He's probably on a list whereby if they don't get Sancho or, I don't think. If you look at the profile of players that they're signing, I don't know. I think it's got to be I think now it's a centre back. and yeah, the wide forward, the sort of Sancho player. You'd almost be like with Thiago. He's 29, isn't he?
Yeah, 29. He's had a lot of injuries, but that's the thing. For me, it's just one of those situations. A lot of people have said, "Oh, it's Alexis Sanchez 2.0," but I don't agree. For me, I think United need an extra player in there. I wouldn't play Van de Beek deep. That's just my opinion. I think he's got decent defensive capabilities, but Pogba's not disciplined enough to hold his position. And so what I would say was, if you brought a Thiago in, United have shown in midfield after Bruno, and if Matic doesn't play, Fred's decent, I would say. He's a good player. McTominay's not really impressed me much since the restart, but I think there's a space there. But yeah, 29 years old. Is he the profile that Ole's going for?
I just think there's too many. I think you just mentioned it there. I think they've kind of got enough now with the Van de Beek signing. So I would be surprised, because I just think that they're then spending money that could be spent completing Sancho, for example. So I don't really see either of those two. I'd be surprised. You never know in football; all sorts of things can happen. For all I know, Fred's on his way. And there is actually, this is the reason why, but. I think he likes Fred. I think Fred did well last season. I was surprised actually how well he did do. He'd been a bit unlucky to lose his place to Matic. I know they're different sorts of players. Fred's more attacking. Yeah, I mean, the centre back's an interesting position, because who do they go for? They do like the guy at
Upamecano.
Yeah, but I don't think we can get him. But the one I always pull out is Koulibaly. That's who they'd love to get. That sort of centre back, a sort of powerhouse, pacey, reads the game brilliantly, blah, 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 blah. Because Maguire and Lindelof can be fragile. And then you look beyond them. Well, he's always injured, isn't he? Or he's
made of glass.
Yeah.
He's made of glass. And
who else have you got, really, who you can rely on? Well, yeah, but they like him. He was captain of that Europa League game, but he's been injured. I worked it out. I don't know. He's been injured a phenomenal number of days. I don't know, really. So, Smalling, basically, he could stay if he wants to, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does leave. Yeah, exactly.
Well, what I want to ask you, Jamie, is that, so the Upamecano rumours have come out. So let's say we can safely assume that Thiago's probably not going to happen. Jack Grealish, now Van de Beek's come in. Maybe Grealish is the next year transfer if Pogba does leave. Because I think that would be an idea. It'd be a clever way, if Pogba does leave, you bring in Van de Beek and Grealish can play on the left wing. But in terms of the centre-back, Upamecano has been very heavily linked the last few days. His release clause is lower next year. Is there the appetite and the money to make that transfer now? Because I imagine you have to pay more than the release clause. We've heard that young lad from Monaco, Badiashile, has been spoken about as well. Koulibaly, for me, was always the one we should have gone for instead of Maguire. I want to know your view on Maguire, because Harry Maguire is a decent defender. I will admit his price tag is why everyone obviously beats him down. But if he's your first choice centre-back, your best centre-back, then you've got a ceiling. I think he's a good centre-back. He's got too many deficiencies in his game, and that's been exploited this season now that you might play higher up. I just think the pace is a problem. He's a good leader. Do you think that United are looking for someone that's going to come straight in and partner him?
Yeah, I think what they're looking at is that they want to get a player who's maybe actually better than Lindelof and Maguire, and then, can lead the defence. I think Maguire's, still going to be the captain, certainly until he has this retrial or this appeal, which is a long way off. But I think I keep on saying it, you lack pace almost to a sort of level that's a bit worrying. What was the game? It was a game, Bournemouth, I believe, lockdown at Old Trafford. I think he won it 5-2, but it was a goal. Excuse me.
You got nutmegged.
Yeah, and you kept on being got at sort of a central position, sort of along your right hand side. I think Stanislas's pace it was. But that was just one example. And Maguire specifically, the amount of times I've been sitting there at Old Trafford. I don't support United or City, by the way. I'm like a lapsed Forest fan. So I really don't care. Obviously, I want them to do well because it's nice if the teams you report on are doing well. Of course it is. But the amount of times I've sat there and God, crumbs, Maguire there's just lost that ball, or and I think you say it well. He's a very good player, but I don't think he's absolutely brilliant. And it's not his fault he costs 75, 80 million. I think you get someone alongside him who is mustard, he's going to look absolutely brilliant because he's got a part, you know what I mean? Lindelof, for me, he's okay. If he had pace, it'd be a different proposition because that would be his X factor for that, for your team. Maguire's got the sort of leadership, and it's an interesting one about Maguire because he has basically been, since obviously the captain since Young left, but he's basically been the sort of the on-field personification of everything Gunnar Solskjær is trying to do with the team spirit, ethic, leadership, and I think he's done that well. It's not that easy to come into United and sort of be the man, and I think he's handled it well. What will be interesting now is whether you like it or not. And I know he's appealing against what happened in Greece, but how will that affect his game? It might not do it, or it might do. But the problem he's going to have, or the challenge, let's say, is every time not every time, but if he makes a couple of mistakes, it'll almost become like, is this because this is hanging on his head? He's obviously denied that. What else? That's going to happen. What else do you do? But it's another little issue. I would actually suggest one of your problem positions as well is goalkeeper, or potentially it is because of the thing with De Gea. What is going to happen then? Well, I think De Gea starts as the number one. I think Henderson's probably told, look, no guarantees, but you've got a chance, of competing. I think De Gea starts. I think they think De Gea is the better keeper, but is that now sort of 2 or 3 years ago when he was winning your player of the season, sort of 3 or 4 years in advance? So I just wonder, is he going to be a headache, or is the goalkeeper going to be a headache where De Gea makes some mistakes, he almost has to drop him? And Henderson, it's a little bit. I know it's always going to be the same, for a goalkeeper at Manchester United, but it's just different. A bit like being a manager or any position, really. But if Henderson comes in and can't handle it, because he made some mistakes at Sheffield United, I know goalkeepers do, and I know they get illuminated, and blah 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 blah. But
especially since the reports were when De Gea was making mistakes, everyone was saying, "Oh, Henderson should take the spot," and as soon as the spotlight was on Henderson started making mistakes. Look, I maintain this that. Look, United are obviously selling Sergio Romero. I believe they've agreed. A fee's been agreed with Villa. Big mistake in my opinion. I think he's never let United down. I probably would have dropped De Gea at the end of last season. I've loved David De Gea. He's been I know you've watched him obviously live. I've watched him live. He's just out of this world. But he's not the same keeper anymore, and he's a great shot stopper. Solskjaer, the modern keepers changed now. They have to play with their feet. They have to be a bit more intelligent. He's not very good at those areas. United went and gave him a £350,000 a week contract. I was against that. I thought United's wage bill's a mess. Obviously, you know this very well. There's players there that shouldn't be there on those wages. And when they gave him that, I just knew that when he did decline, they're just not going to be able to shift him. And now they're stuck with a player who they have to play because he's on such a big wage. He's probably got a clause in his contract that says, I need to pay this amount of games. I would have dropped him for Romero at the end of last season. I would have given Henderson a new contract. Again, 120,000 a week for someone that hasn't played for United is crazy for me, but that's just the way it is. I would have sent Henderson back to Sheffield United or somewhere else in the Premier League and played regularly. And I would have said to Romero, right, you've got the number one, but De Gea, you've got to fight for it back. If De Gea doesn't have the appetite, you ship him out in the January or summer.
I think the thing with Henderson is I don't think he wanted to go out on loan. I think he's looked at the Euros next summer maybe and thought, my best chance maybe of forcing him away into the actual team, not just the squad, is if I'm playing in goal for Manchester United. It's a big, not gamble, but a big ask for him to do break into United's team. But I think fair play to him, that he's decided against going back out on loan. Whether it works for him, I don't know. The problem with De Gea, this is the problem with goalkeeper, because you've only got one of them, obviously, in a team. If you drop that player because he deserves to be dropped, and the next one comes in, and as a couple of shockers, where'd you go then? It's sort of almost you go back to the first, and that's just the way it is. That's football sort of thing. Excuse me, but I'll be interested to see, because I don't know. I think you're right about Romero. Why they getting rid of a guy who's Argentina's number one, or certainly has been? And as you say, I've watched him live a few times for United, obviously, in this job. And he's always done brilliant, if you like. Never a mistake. I can't remember a mistake. That's the guy who's having to come in cold. He's not playing week in, week out. Just here and there. So
I agree. I agree with you. I mean, moving on. Let's move on to Fred quickly, and then one more question. I appreciate we've gone a bit over time, Jamie. So sorry about that. But Fred, the reports of him to Galatasaray, nonsense, or is there something in it?
Never say nonsense or never in any sort of transfer, but I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised. I think he might want to get rid of Pereira, for example, more easily. You know, Fred is a player who now sort of knows the Solskjær way, has done well for you, has looked actually a United player, certainly a squad player, you know, good enough to be a squad player, if not a starter sometimes. I just don't see if he's trying to build a squad of depth, of quality. Because the other thing to say is, you know, that was a long season last season. I know, obviously, because of the lockdown, but there were times when he was looking around, I think, if it, you know, with regard to sort of say his front players, who can I bring on? And I think midfield was actually one area was a little bit better stocked. I just don't think, I don't know, it might happen, but I would be interested to ask if that happens. I'd be interested to ask Solskjær myself. You know, not in any aggressive way, but what's your thinking there? Because you've got a player there who's bedded in for you, who's looked decent. It might be a balance of books thing, but I'd say keep an eye on it, but I'd be surprised.
Okay, brilliant. Let's move on to the last question. And I know you mentioned earlier about the direct football and how, you know, perhaps United don't necessarily need one, but why is it that every summer we hear these reports saying United looking for direct football, and then you see a report later on in the summer? For me, look, I'm just a fan, so you know, you're a journalist, you're an expert. Like, is it just United trying to appease the fans? Because that's how I feel sometimes. I've seen this report for the last 4 or 5 summers, and you know, what I would say is this as well. Second part of the question, sorry, Jamie, is Nicky Butt's obviously done some really great stuff with the academy. I think the academy is now starting to purchase some of the best young talent around, and I like that strategy again. That's back to United's culture and United's values. Is there any possibility that he could maybe move upstairs and be that bridge between? I mean, this is just devil's advocate, but if they don't want to go and bring a big guy like Luis Campos from Lille in, or someone like Monchi from Sevilla, why not just bring in someone that knows the club?
I would be surprised, given how pleased they are with Solskjær, given how he's got veto on signings, given how the structure now is that I think Nicky Butt even now does have some sort of say with regard. Actually, the word you use there, bridgey, is some sort of link. I think actually materially when it comes to sort of a voice on recruitment. I mean, the story first originated what turned out to be Mourinho's last summer. August of 2018. I happened to break that story actually for the Observer, and at the time I was told that we're going to do this. It'll be the first one in our history, however many 100 odd years you've been going then. But since then it has been, if not downgraded, sounds wrong, but sort of it's no longer a sort of an overseeing director of football. It became a technical director. How it was characterised to me was it was going to be a director of football, you know, in all the ways you'd think that would mean. It then became a technical director, someone to sit alongside. So not a sort of, and why these, to be honest, I hadn't noticed any stories about it this summer. If they're about, fair enough, but I just don't think it fits. They may recruit a guy who's a football expert, but I don't think he's going to sit above Solskjær. I just don't see that because of how what they've got going now. They think that's working, so it may well just be to do a slightly different role than what you might imagine. Because I just don't think they want one anymore. I think they've kind of understood. They think that they now understand more about recruitment, how to do it, how to work it in a club internally in terms of who has a say, and then who then goes out and tries to get the deal. So again, a bit like Fred leaving or Grealish coming. I'd be really surprised if you wake up one morning and here we have a director of football who's sort of almost like the continental model. I just don't think so.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. I mean, the person I look over to is probably Edwin van der Sar, someone like that who knows the club. I think that's what United need. An outside hire would be nice, maybe with some fresh perspective. But I do think that maybe someone like him, Edward was not going to give up the CEO position, we know that. But maybe someone who's on the more of the footballing side that can, like I say, bridge that gap. But Jamie, I appreciate I've taken way more of your time than I wanted to, but it's been an absolute pleasure. The insight has been phenomenal, and just tell the listeners when your book's coming out, and like what platforms it'll be released on.
Okay, well, thank you very much for kind words. Yeah, so it's a biography of Solskjær. It's called The Red Apprentice because he's their sort of great hope. It's out on the 29th of October, which obviously now next month. It can be pre-ordered, which is obviously you buy it now for delivery. I think it's the day after it comes out, or if not the day. People have been doing that actually, and I feel very grateful. It's gone up to today. It was its highest ever position, number 7, and that was on the Amazon. Amazon's not the only place you can buy it, but it is a massive, obviously, retailer of books worldwide. You can get it on Kindle, hardback, or audio book. And so, yeah, I mean, hopefully, as I was the same, I learnt about Solskjær. Because if you actually look at him, his life, and actually his football career, there's not that much known about him beyond what we kind of all know, if you understand what I mean. And so I was very interested to find out some of this new stuff. So hopefully that's what the reader will, enjoy a little bit of, just finding out a lot more about him, because he's had a very, very interesting life. The Champions League goal and what he's doing at United is a good indicator of his interesting life, but there's lots of other things as well which are interesting, I'd say, sort of revelationary. So hopefully, people enjoy it if they do happen to be kind enough to buy it.
Sounds fascinating. I'm definitely going to buy a copy. And last question. What is he like as a person? Because, he seems like a really decent person. He seems like has time for everybody. I know some people think he's a soft touch. I think he's shown he's got a ruthless side. But is he what he appears on the surface, or is there just so much more to him?
I think that's a good way of putting it. What you see is what you get, really. He's friendly. As much as he can do, he tries to have a warm rapport with you at press conferences. Obviously, he sees the same reporters like myself sitting there at the Jimmy Murphy Centre most often, at the training ground. A few of us he calls by our name. Basically, if he knows your first name and you're a regular and he'll call you by that. Nice little touches. But I think he's got a bit of steel in him. I think as I say, that Ferguson era was filled with unbelievable footballers who mentally were at the edge, and I think he was one of them. And I like the clip of him telling Lingard off. I think it was the game, the derbies. Was it at City? It was in January, end of January. Anyway, basically saying he might have sworn, he might not, but one more of those and you're off. That's kind of what he's like. He doesn't say too much on the touchline. If he sort of sits there, but when it's needed, a bit like Ferguson, really. So, the bottom line, of course, is results. It doesn't matter. You can have all these things, but if you're not winning enough matches to sort of be a proper football team, in the end, it's goodbye, isn't it, for them all? But I think what he did last season is a pretty good calling card, really. I don't think he could have done much more. I don't really think he could have finished ahead of Liverpool or City. You might not.
Not with that squad.
You might not like to hear that, United fans. I get that.
No.
This is the truth. So what could you do? Finish third? You only just did it, but he did do it. So now is the time between now and, let's say, to later start of the season. So let's say January. I normally say Christmas. Let's see where you are in January. You need to be flying, or more or less flying, I'd say, in the league. And like Sancho's been signing, popping in goals, and it's like crumbs. Okay, this lot are a bit of a terrifying proposition. So that's the challenge for him. That's what you got. That's what you got to do at United. It's simple as that.
I completely agree. It's exciting though. It's been 7 years of obviously difficultness, but it's definitely exciting. And Jamie, again, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me on.
No problem. And to all listeners, just like, subscribe. We've got some great guests coming on as well. Obviously, Jamie is our star one this week, but we've got a lot of new content coming up. So make sure you retweet this out, and we will see you next time.